Hello and welcome back. Gilad Garon co-founded ASOCS in 2003, has been spearheading the company as Chief Executive Officer ever since, driven by his passion for disruptive technologies and the redefinition of existing markets. He's here to talk about a critical and large business opportunity, harnessing the power of the edge to deliver 5G private networks for Industry 4.0. So what are the key drivers and challenges in the industrial use case? Is it a simple choice between hyperscale cloud providers or private clouds? Can cellular operators play a role in this market? And how does ASOC's unique technology fit the bill? What can be learned from the first wave of installations as we move to the next inflection point? Well, let's find out. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Gilad Garon.
Hi, everybody. I will try to use my limited time today to give you guys more insight into the industrial use case where it comes to 5G and the role of edge clouds and operators. So there's a lot of discussion in the industry about the connection between 5G networks and edge. And as you have heard from previous speakers and from Satya, that's pretty much the flavor of the day. But how do you actually build services of value around these big themes? I think that's the question that most of us are and should be asking ourselves. So Industry 4.0 is, again, a very strong theme and has been for a while when it comes to the usage of 5G and the edge. And this should not be taken simply, because the industries have not been the most innovative of segments in the enterprise world. But something is definitely happening around this combination of 5G edge and the industrial use case. And the very simplistic intuition around it is to understand that an industrial floor is really the microcosmos and a glimpse into the future. So we've all heard conversations about autonomous cars driving the streets of San Francisco over 5G, and that would happen or will happen in a few years from now. But AGVs are driving the floors of production in Taiwan, Japan, and the United States today. So a lot of the forward-looking applications that we're all looking forward to get from 5G on the consumer and the city, or the metro, and even the nationwide are really being created, tested, and verified in the modern production floor. There's quite a lot of numbers in the industry about figuring out what would be the return on investment, the business case around putting 5G into production floors and industry in general. Frankly, most of them are pretty much guessing. So in reality, what we're doing right now at production floors, we're trying to validate some of these assumptions, sometimes in trial and error, trying to figure out what are the right use cases to be moved or to be used using 5G and edge technologies, what should be perhaps benched, or some use cases may never happen at the production floor. But what is exciting to see is that never before this kind of feedback, this kind of velocity is happening in production floors because we're building these 5G private networks. In macro networks, it takes a very, very long time from the time that you build a network, qualify the network, get your consumers to move into that network. But with 5G private networks on-prem, you can actually validate and test new use cases, sometimes within days from the minute you decided to check them, and that is a wonderful cycle time from infrastructure to application. So again, analyst data is all for industrial IoT in an overwhelming number, and it does seem that it is on track. But I think what is more important to see is that this is not a hardware-driven business. It's not about the cost of radios or sensors. It's really going to be, the value is really going to be in the software. And the reason for that is that we're not just about connecting devices to a network. We're about creating value from the data which is generated, in this case, at the production floor. So why 5G for Industry 4.0? The obvious answer is that 5G is fast. But in reality, that does not even appear in my 8 most important features. First of all, unlike consumer-driven networks, where this is the battle for fast speed dial, and every network wants to show that it does 1 gig or 2 gigs worth of traffic, in the industrial shop floor, it's all about reliability and predictability. Another aspect we need to bear in mind is that 5G private networks in the production floor are really about uplink speeds, and uplink speeds tend to be less dramatic than downlink speeds. So it's really not about a faster internet. Yes, 5G is fast. We are running uplink speeds of hundreds of megabits and downlink speeds of a gigabit, but really what is being used is the fact that 5G can be very, very reliable, provided they're set up correctly. Then, as Satya mentioned in his speech, it's really about latency sensitive or low latency services. What we are seeing is that many production floor owners are not really consumed about hitting this famous 1 millisecond latency speeds, but they care more about the predictability and the reliability of that data, which is called time-sensitive networks. So time-sensitive networks are more important to many than ultra-low reliable latency networks. Then there is the aspect of the technology itself. The fact that 5G can now be deployed as software brings to the table the possibility of using virtualization, which is a common practice for any enterprise as he deploys his services. Speed of implementation, as we will show shortly, you can really set up such private 5G networks in hours and days over what used to be the norm of weeks and sometimes months. And of course, it's then about how do we secure, or how do we use 5G as another zero trust means for security? How do we provide differentiated services over network slicing? So as you can see, it's not about speed, but it's really about reliability and predictability of the data transferred from sensor to application. So, like any other 5G private network, we are essentially providing service on-prem, in this case, in the modern production floor. But what is unique, again, as we mentioned before, it's the way we leverage the edge cloud. So you could build 2 separate networks, a 5G hardware-driven network and connect it to an edge cloud. But what we do and what makes more sense is to combine the two. So actually deliver the 5G private network as an application, as a service on top of the edge cloud. And that is really the big revolution of companies such as ASOCS and others who are going for these on-premise or far edge or edge clouds as a deployment means. It's not about just the low latency which is available, but actually about the way these networks can be deployed, procured, managed, monitored, and upgraded. It's all done in software, and it's all done as part of your classical edge, in this case, cloud edge service. So how does a typical deployment really look like? We find sometimes that when we speak with new customers, their perception is about, very large venues, such as an Airbus production or things of that nature. But the reality is that the lion's share of production floors worldwide are smaller than 50,000 square feet. For us Europeans, that means less than 5,000 square meters. And actually, most of them are even smaller than half of that. So really, the deployment size is not large. And what that implies is that you do not need a lot of radios to cover that production floor, making the cost of radios a very small part of the overall deployment. And that's great news for the service providers and also for the enterprise itself. The second thing to understand in a production floor is we're not talking right now about big numbers. Yes, we heard Satya's talking about 1 million sensors per square mile, and that may happen in the metro cities such as Tokyo one day. But really, in the production floor, it's about tens, at maximum, maybe hundreds of high value devices that would be driving and would be connected to the 5G private network. And AGV is a great example, and AI or AR goggles for digital twin is another example, and of course the machines themselves. So the industrial floor it's not really about big numbers. It's about the quality and the value of the information and the device itself. The third thing that we're seeing is about capacity. So the capacity of these types of private networks right now are in the few gigs. To some of us, that sounds like not much. I remember the days that you would cover a whole city with about 500 megabits would be a big number in the GSM era. So a few gigabits, which are available in terms of capacity at the production floor, that's a lot of capacity. And of course, we will see it growing as the applications mature. So needless to say, we're really just getting started. So the more data that would be used, the more devices that would be connected to the network. Of course, from a manufacturer point of view, the more sites he needs to build. This all will move in a trajectory of growth. And that is another key motivation to harness the power of software and edge. You do not want to commit a very large sum of capital to pre-build based on worst case scenarios your own private network. That makes sense potentially in a macro network. But in your private network, you really want to pay for what you need, but still have the availability to grow as you use or pay as you grow. And that is, again, an intrinsic feature in any cloud service. And in our case, at the 5G private network, is yet another cloud service. So what's ahead? After the basic connectivity is all settled, new exciting features are ahead of us. Precise indoor location would pose tremendous opportunities as AR, location, and the quality of service all converge into one service. As we mentioned, low latency services, but also TSN services, where it's really about the quality or latency as a service. And then all the technologies that augment 5G or complete 5G that we've all talked about numerous times in this conference, whether it's machine learning or AI, video optimization, security, all these technologies will play a big role in the 5G edge and would complement the service that we're offering at the private network. So to just talk a little bit about the recipe, what does it really take to build in order to have a great 5G private network? My advice to you, not just because we have all these three elements, is to make sure that your vendor or the network that you build is built on these three elements in order to make your network agile and built for the future. One, of course, rely on the Open RAN ecosystem. There's a tremendous ecosystem of radio providers, of device maker, of software providers such as ourselves and others. Some of them are our competitors who are really all just one bulk of partners participating in this Open RAN. Open RAN is the only way to build any type of cellular network, yet let alone a private network. Then focus on software. There's plenty of ISVs who can offer 5G and software. Again, the way to work, as this is a new standard and you want to grow as this technology develops. And third is, of course, the outcome of having software and openness, and that is open cloud, public cloud, edge cloud with scale, which are easy to manage, which are secure, and then they're a great model as you build multiple sites within your organization.
In 2019, ASOCS launched its first 5G RAN for private networks. ASOCS software required no hardware acceleration and can be deployed on any commercial server. By joining forces, Microsoft enables ASOCS to offer the world's first cloud-native 5G standalone network as a service, available on a private edge platform with complete decoupling of network software from hardware. The solution is cloud-native and operated by enterprise IT teams using the familiar Azure cloud tools. This relieves the customer from handling server maintenance and supports simplifying resource deployment and reducing costs of scaling, just like an IT cloud. ASOCS and Microsoft provide all the network functions needed to build private mobile networks. Once your physical devices, such as ASOCS radio access points and Azure Stack Edge hardware is installed and network connectivity is established, your enterprise IT teams can begin leveraging their networking skills by orchestrating a turnkey end-to-end workflow. This is achieved using the Azure Portal and Azure Network Function Manager. The Azure Network Function Manager enables you to automate deployment of deploy and manage network functions on your private edge devices. You can use the Azure Portal to easily deploy the ASOCS O-RAN compliant RAN, that is the CU and DU managed application on Azure Stack Edge. Similarly, you can quickly deploy the Metaswitch 5G Fusion Core, and your private mobile network is ready for use. Use ASOCS Network Management Solution to operate and manage the radio access network. With this powerful combination, the Azure Private MEC solution enables you to run latency-sensitive applications at the edge of your enterprise network.
The way we see our partnership with Microsoft, it brings to the table Packet Core as a service, cloud infrastructure, the availability of third-party applications. What we solve them in this partnership together with Microsoft is we provide a single function network focusing mainly on the ease of use of the system. Cyrus 2.0 is the brand name for our IT architecture. We enable a variety of third-party Open RAN radios coming from different vendors for specific use cases. We can actually tune the software and hardware of this overall solution to match the individual needs of the enterprise. 5G private networks are just getting started. But as we look into the near-term future, it's really going to be about adding additional value-added services into the mix. It would be a mixture of adding AI or machine learning to the mix to improve the functionality of the network itself, but also to improve the performance and the applicability of the end devices and complementary technologies such as location. And we believe that the future is all about having 5G as part of the cloud service that the enterprise use.
So, thank you for watching this movie. And now you can also see that this is not just slideware. So ASOCS and Microsoft already deployed several milestone deployments worldwide. One which is quite famous is the project we have done with Inventec in Taiwan late last year, together with our partners at the Firm Networks. And what made that project unique is that we were actually able to connect the production floor to 5G and AI in a very short time. And the outcome was very conclusive. We were able, within a few weeks, to show to the production floor managers that they can improve their first pass yields by a substantial number. And that was done really by a very simple application, by taking data that would have otherwise just been stored or would never have moved to their NOC center over cable, but just moving a very cheap layer of 5G and then move that data in real time to an AI and machine learning engine at the factory floor, who analyzed those images and actually found defects in the product that that specific machine was never designed to build. So actually 5G can, if you will, upscale or retrofit your existing machines, not just connect them to the internet, if you will, but actually connect them to a new world that would have otherwise been locked from that machine capability. So spectrum. Spectrum has always been an issue when it came to cellular technology. And what is probably the most dramatic shift that has happened in 5G is that in most industrial countries in the world, there is a very rich offering of spectrum available outside the world of operators. And that gives tremendous opportunity for integrators and enterprises themselves to deploy 5G networks if they so choose on their own, and for big integrators to offer a whole 5G managed service over such spectrum. But does that mean that operators are done? My simple answer is that operators need to realize that the specific use case of 5G private networks in countries that do have alternatives, and enterprises in most industrial countries have now an alternative, it's not obvious that they would choose to go through a carrier as a managed service or run over a carrier spectrum. So that is sometimes a hard reality for some operators to realize. But if they do realize it, they can still play a very important role in 5G private networks and even in 5G production floor, where the use case for mobility or for outdoor mobility is still perhaps a few years away. And the best way to do it is to partner with cloud edge providers, to listen to the customers and realize that for them, for the first time, it's really about software. It's really about combining their IT with the OT, and the traditional way in which operators were accustomed to deploy cellular networks in building or on-prem has really need to dramatically change. And we're very happy to see all the recent announcements in which operators and cloud edge providers or public cloud providers are teaming up, because that's probably the best way to move forward in a partnership model. So with that, Adam, I'm willing to take some questions if there are some.
Gilad, thank you very much indeed, sir. Much appreciated. Yeah, really, really interesting. It's one of those Industry 4.0s. It's certainly one of the kind of topic areas I'm absolutely fascinated by. And what I would like to just start with, if we can, Gilad, is when you first, so I've written down challenge, and then I've written down moments of learning / excitement. So let's start with the second one, moments of learning / excitement. So thinking about that sort of Inventec, and kind of case study you talked about there. What were there must have been challenges. You were set out to try and solve two particular problems. I think it was AR and AOI you talked about. So there must have been challenges. We can talk about challenges in a minute. But when it was in, what were the moments of excitement for those people on the factory floor, for the senior leadership team at Inventec? What did it solve? Because that must have been a really nice moment when you see all that come together.
Absolutely, Adam. I mean, for disclosure, I've been in networks for about 20 years, and you really just focus on making the connection. And once the connection is there, you're pretty much done. It's up for somebody else to leverage that connection. And here in 5G and in private networks, I think for the first time, the direct linkage between the connectivity and the application is really, really tightly coupled. So that was sort of like the first part that made us as infrastructure providers very happy. But I think the second part is that we all read, and frankly, some of us could be quite skeptical about things like AI. Right? I mean, for some of us, these sound like far and remote features. But then when you see how quickly an algorithm can learn a behavior and output and, bring results that, it's just incredible. And I can tell you that some of these results literally happened in minutes from the moment the machine was connected. So some of these learnings could be truly immediate. You don't have to wait a very long time to see what is the impact of connecting your data to an AI engine. And really, most of the time, for most of these venues, the issue was always connectivity, right? They really typically had just, their copper line, and it was connected to an app that was provided by the company that provided the machine in a don't touch kind of scenario. And now all of a sudden, it's sort of like a new set, a new dimension, if you will. I hope I'm not getting too carried away, but it's like a new dimension opening, and then any number of things can happen. And I think that was the part that was amazing for us, the way that these, big themes, some say buzzwords, can truly connect to create value in an almost an obvious kind of way.
Well, I mean, they are buzzwords, but they are buzzwords for a reason. They may be overused, but when they're right, they are words that create a buzz. So absolutely, 100%. But let's talk a little bit, if we can, about challenges, because I think, you're either winning or you're learning is the sort of hopeful approach to these things. A lot of people these days talk about you need to fail fast, learn, improve, etc., etc. Now, this is clearly a very, very successful implementation, but there must have been learnings on that road. Can you talk us through a couple?
Yes. Well, first of all, we're not going to mention, the virus in this event again, but one of our biggest challenges was this entire deployment for all partners was done in remote.
Wow.
Yes, there were some people on the ground, but the entire, RF build, all the things that used to be solved by just sending an FAE, those were not available. So really, this was a great test case for the power of software and for the cloud. That was definitely one challenge. The second challenge is dealing with concerns, with fears, most of them quite justified of, the production floor managers who are in charge of keeping their operation intact, security, safety. So there's a lot of these. There's a very big bucket of concerns in a production line about adopting and delivering new technologies. So really, what you need to do is realize that all these concerns are valid and justified, and try to break them down by making small steps. And I think one of the biggest learnings that we have had is not to come into a factory and say, hey, we're displacing everything. We're going to displace your emergency red button that you have in the production floor to 5G. And that's very counterproductive and frankly doesn't make any sense. But if you just build those incremental connections at the production floor, keep your mission critical production line intact, at least for a while, then you can build the trust and the value within all the stakeholders in the organization, as because they all want to innovate, they all want to make their factories better, but you got to realize that these kinds of revolutions cannot happen overnight.
Of course. Thank you very much, Gilad. Now, producer Emily has very kindly printed off some questions for me from the chat. The first one is from Alex, and it says, good work, great presentation. How far on the journey are you today? What do you think the end goal might look like?
Well, obviously, as I said in the beginning, this is really early. So, we use the words POCs and trials very often in 2020. The whole ecosystem is right now in the phase of learning. It's very rapid, but it is still in the phase of learning. And I think a lot of modesty needs to be placed here. So even, the 5G elements that we're all talking about, whether the network slicing, ultra low reliability, these are features which are being gradually implemented at the device level. So when we say, where are we? We are where the industry is. We are where the whole value chain is, and you're only as strong as your weakest point, right? So right now, I think we all need to understand that what you can really build right now with 5G is get those big chunks of data-driven devices at your floor uploaded into your local cloud. That is the basic functionality that needs to work and work well. Once that is achieved, then we can move to the next step of connecting stuff like location and other more advanced 3GPP features. And we're predicting that would happen in the next 12 to 18. And some of these features will only be available, frankly, in about 2 years. But there's plenty to do and plenty to benefit from the technology, even at this early stage.
Fantastic. Thank you. Next question is from Andre. What is the main driving force behind resistance to your technology? Why are some still unwilling / skeptical to embrace it as you might like?
First of all, especially veterans of telecommunications are still, frankly, struggling with the fact that software is replacing hardware. So there's a little bit of market education and show me thing that needs to happen. The second, which is more specific to the industrial use cases, as we mentioned, is experience. I'm a production floor manager. I've been using SCADA networks for the last 30 years. I've seen other 2G, 3G, 4G, Wi-Fi technologies come and go, and what remained was my legacy network. So there is that false, perhaps, reliance on previous experience, which is creating some delays into the technology. And again, as we said, it's really about one use case at a time.
Lovely. We had this may be interesting to you, it may not. Had an event the other week, and we had a panel of consultants. I'm not going to say the consultants, I'm not going to say the event. The audience was a leadership teams from various companies, and these consultants were consultants to this industry. And we put a thing up, and we said, what do you think is the biggest problem preventing digital innovation? And the options were, you know, technology and cost and everything you would expect, leadership, but also in there was incentives, processes. We don't have the processes in place. And it's the way we've always done things. And all the consultants said it will be leadership and it will be cost. And all of our audience, all the leaders of the companies said it's the way we've always done things, it's incentives and it's processes. You know, basically we've got to break the muscle memory of what this company is if we need to build new muscles. It always seems so simple when it's kept simple. Gilad, I really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Speak to you soon. Take care.
Thank you very much, Alan.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Gilad.